All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Today we are talking about community preparedness mindset, how to set it up, what it is, and why it is crucially important to your success. So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at her. Thanks again for joining us at Inside My Canoe Head. We appreciate all the feedback we continue to get at InsideMyCanoeHead.ca. If you've got good, bad, or indifferent, or anything you'd like to tell us, please tell us, because we want to know the truth of what the world thinks of our programming. And this week, we want to talk about community preparedness mindset. What is that? Well, that is the idea that on average, there's a 5,500 to 1 ratio between on-duty and available emergency responders and citizens in the average urban and suburban area in North America, okay? You are not likely to be rescued in a significant event by a first responder. You are likely to be aided, rescued, and pulled out of a crushed building or given first aid or taken care of, fed, watered, and sheltered by your neighbors, by your community. The idea of adopting a community preparedness mindset is putting some type of organizational frame around how that community is going to get ready to respond to the big bad day when the shizzy hits the fizzy or and the world goes pear-shaped and you and your neighbors are placed in some interesting and precarious positions. So when disasters strike, we know there are 4 responses. There's your familial response, you and your family. There's the community response, your neighborhood around you. There's the corporate business sector response. And then there's the public sector government response with first responders, emergency management, and all of that. Each one of those will execute their plans in an impromptu assistance or in some degree of organizational standard to their membership and those in our immediate vicinity. They are not necessarily well connected. Their relationships may be loose, weak, or non-existent. Hence, what normally happens is you have 4 uncoordinated responses that are ongoing each and every time that a community is affected by an emergency or a disaster. It is not a question of one being a more important, a higher priority, a better one, whatever it may be. It's the fact that to understand that these 4 responses are ongoing at the same time. The public sector is built to respond to the emergencies with a minor surge capacity for singular events. So, for example, here in Ottawa, where I live, we had a set of tornadoes come through in 2018, destroyed small parts of the city because it was very well contained within 3 neighborhoods of the city. The city was able to respond en masse with a minor one-time surge capacity to deal with it, right? It was an emergency, but it wasn't a disaster for the city because they didn't require any external assistance. They were basically able to wrap it up and deal with it within their own resources, right? This is the way they're set up. Or a major structural fire. So if there's an apartment building with 120 apartments, 40 stories high, that catches on fire and significantly burns, where you have, hundreds of families that are now literally homeless and all of the socioeconomic issues that come along with that. That is a significant event. Most cities are designed to deal with that. However, when you have, they're not built to manage a significant event. When you have a major significant event that hits an urban or suburban area, that large scales are affected, it very quickly will overwhelm the local first responders, right? Now, from a public sector perspective, what they do to manage these type of events is they have mutual assistance agreements with neighboring municipalities, right? Unfortunately for Ottawa, there's nobody around us. I mean, Gatineau, which is the city of Quebec, Hull and Aylmer, right across the Ottawa River from us, really is considered part of the National Capital Region because what hits us hits them. It's kind of very commonplace to share across that. But most cities have some type of mutual support agreement with somebody an hour or 2 away that can send resources in to deal with it. That's, of course, assuming that that other community is not also affected by the very same calamity that hit. And as well, you have opportunities for higher level government to become involved for physical resources and unique capabilities. For example, here in the city of Ottawa, we live in the province of Ontario, and they have unique resources. They have a well-staffed Provincial Emergency Operations Center that is a great coordinating agency. There's the Ontario Provincial Police that has thousands of members that can be surged to an event. And then there are linked to the higher federal authority for the Canadian federal government to access the Canadian Armed Forces, essentially the Army, to have them deploy to help as well. Emergency helo, emergency airlift, intelligence gathering. Sometimes there's a unique capability that a city needs in response to an emergency that they don't need anybody to come in and take over responsibility and take over command and control of the response. But what cities need is they have a unique skill set that they don't possess, that somebody else in a higher level of government possesses, and they can ask for it, and that's part of the reciprocal agreements. This is all very well and good. They're well-entrenched plans, well-rehearsed, and well understood. The issue is that I was a member of a number of these Army organizations that are on disaster response. We're on 72 hours notice to move at any one time. 72 hours notice to move means we're not moving for 72 hours after you tell us. It takes us that long to get everything together, to put a bunch of people in vehicles, to organize it. Remember, we have to do our own planning. We have to do our own issuing of orders, etc. And then we have to do a road move from wherever we are to wherever the target location is. So significant external help for a major event that happens in an urban or suburban area is literally going to be days away. Right? There'll be a lot of cool flashing lights that'll be popped up all over the place, but significant events to ameliorate the suffering and pain that's happening to the people may take days, irrespective of where you are. The idea of a community response is that you have members of the community will help out. We know from research, and I've researched this for over a decade in the field of preparedness, that people don't freeze, they don't fight, they don't panic in times of emergency. People respond, and they respond very, very well, right? When you have an earthquake in pretty much any part of the world, when the urban search and rescue, heavy urban and light urban search and rescue teams get there, most of the people are already pulled out of the rubble. It's only the really hard to reach people buried well within the rubble that are rescued by the first responders. The majority of people are assisted by their neighbors, by family, by the people in the area, right? That's who will take care of you. That's who will give you food, water, first aid, shelter you. That type of thing is all going to be done. Your neighbors are going to be banging on your door at 2 a.m. when they see fire on your roof. And that's crystal clear. It doesn't matter what area you look at, what disaster you look at. That's basically what happens. People help people. We know that. People care about people. People will do the right thing under stressful situations. The idea of a community response preparedness mindset is to put some type of organizational structure around that. So first, let's check what the research and the literature tells us about this. Well, the community response falls into a number of categories created by the Disaster Research Center out of the University of Delaware. This is the standard that is used across the industry. There are 4 distinct types of responses and organizations that are involved in emergencies. A DRC Type 1 are those with a mandated, regulated, or legislated responsibility. These are your fire, police, EMS, and formal emergency management within the public sector. They're there, they're mandated to be there, they're legally required to be there, and they will respond. A DRC Type 2 are those with agreements with a contracted role. So think about the Red Cross, who are contracted to do local emergency assistance, Salvation Army. So these are formal organizations that have a formal role in emergency management that are not government, but are contracted to assist. A DRC Type 3 is what we call an extending. These are groups that exist within society with an organized structure within the community, and then they adopt a new role in response. Think about church groups that come together to offer food and shelter. The church group's role on a day-to-day is to support the members of the church and keep the church functioning. But when a disaster happens, they extend their services by taking the same structure that they have, but fulfilling new roles. And now a DRC Type 4 is an emerging group. And these are groups that have no pre-existing structure or existence prior to their role in an emergency management response, but they're created in the response time frame. And a great example of that is the Student Army in New Zealand and the Christchurch earthquakes between 2011 and 2012. There's a massive response from the students at the university that showed up totally unorganized in the hundreds in different neighborhoods to provide assistance. They're ad hoc groups of people offering assistance to their neighbors. And this is one of the leading study areas within emergency management right now, is really zeroing in on this ad hoc volunteer groups, the emerging volunteer groups that show up because people will show up, right? When you ask people to fill sandbags, be careful that you might get what you want. Thousands of people could show up to help out their community. You're going to have these large groups of disorganized or not even, maybe even reasonably organized groups of people doing something that they're not normally tasked with doing in society. They're going to be there. The idea behind community response is to put that organizational structure in place, to foster a greater, more focused community response. The intent is to create a prepared community through education. Create response organizations in advance where the equipment and knowledge is pre-positioned within the community. And then a great example of that is CERT, and it's called the Community Emergency Response Team. It's a formally organized system of training that existed, and it came out of the United States of America, I believe. And you can create CERT chapters in your, and basically they teach people first aid, how to search structures, how to put different colored tape on the structure as to when it's been cleared, how to assess whether something is habitable for living in, how to provide first aid, take care of food, water, and shelter for those within the neighborhood. So basically, a CERT community and has key champions within that are well-trained and equipment that's pre-positioned, is that the community internally and integrally has what it needs to respond. So it has the first aid equipment, the rubble clearing equipment, it has the water purification equipment, and it has a small shelter capability within already pre-positioned in the community. So when an event happens, that community members have the training, they know what to do, they can take care and start meeting the basic needs of all of the residents while they're waiting for, even if they do need public sector response. Because remember, 5,500 to 1 is the average ratio. With that being true in where you live, the odds of you getting help in a short period of time in a surge, sudden onset, large-scale event is slim to nil. Another great international example is the THW, which is a federal agency of technical relief out of Germany. It's German civil defense. They have over 80,000 volunteers in the country with 668 individual units set up within the country. Now, these are all volunteer organizations. They're all structured by volunteers. They do the training that they think is appropriate. So they'll do some first aid training, rubble clearing, root clearing, communications. All of these basically you're creating a bunch of individual communities that together as a community, as a holistic neighborhood, they are able to take care of their own integral internal needs. People have access to the training that they need at no cost. So for example, people get trained the trainer on first aid, and then these community organizations offer first aid training for free to neighborhood members, right? And then through fundraising, through business opportunities and fundraising, you generate the money, not from individuals, but through fundraising, you generate the money to buy the essential equipment and pre-position it in neighborhoods. One great example is there's some neighborhoods in outside of Auckland, New Zealand, Christchurch, after these earthquakes, that they now have sheds with all of their equipment outside of buildings, because you don't want to put the equipment in somebody's house or garage because that could collapse in an earthquake, but an independent shed in the backyard where everybody knows where it is, everybody knows where the key is, everybody knows what's there, the food, water, shelter, health, safety, and security, and everything you need is all contained within this shed for the neighborhood. Everybody knows it's there. Nobody steals from it because it's there for a community purpose. You're building a community framework. You're identifying key champions who are interested. You're making them in leadership positions. You're getting the trainer. You're holding free training sessions within a community, and you're building a more resilient community internally, lowering the immediate need for access to public sector first response in times of significant events. Now, one of the difficult questions, we understand that's generally how it's done, right? The difficult side of it is that we need to have a champion to start this. Right, I mentioned it before, that building these community prepared mindsets starts with somebody taking the lead. Somebody has to be the catalyst, or somebody has to step up after a catalytic type of event occurs that would put people in harm's way, and you're like, hey, that didn't go very well. We might want to be better prepared the next time around. Hey, how about we get together and talk about this? Somebody has to create desire within the community or to foster a place to grow the social capital. We call it an enabling environment. So somebody has to set up the enabling environment where people can come together and talk about the important issues that they have, right? And it usually only takes 1 or 2 champions within a neighborhood, because most people are very much interested in learning how to protect themselves and their family. That's just an inherent need. And people, like I said, the 3 rules of life that I've talked about before, people enjoy being in a community. People thrive better when they have a sense of place, a sense of belonging, a shared value with the people around them. That improves individuals' quality of life. It improves their mental health. It gets them outdoors and meeting people, which improves their physical health. And there's a whole bunch of secondary and tertiary benefits of creating a prepared mindset within the community. And so the idea is it begins with somebody creating that enabling environment, an initial meeting, an initial get-together. It's about building relationships, creating that sense of belonging. Imagine if you had a number of marginalized or vulnerable people within your neighborhood. So, for example, you had an elderly lady living alone in a townhouse in your street. And if you didn't know her and you didn't get to know the neighbors, you might not understand that, well, she doesn't have any family in the area. Every one of her family is actually a plane ride away. So if a significant event occurs, nobody's coming to check on her. Nobody's going to be able to help her. So maybe once we identify that, then you know what? Somebody will go over and knock on that door, an hour 12 of a power outage in the middle of the summer and say, hey, can we help you? Is there something we can do? Are you okay? We're just checking in on you. And we'll be periodically checking in on you. People who are marginalized within society, people who culturally may not see themselves as a sense of place. They're looking for a sense of belonging. People that are, for example, people living financially precariously may be in situations where they're in trouble, and where do they go to get help if they're running out of month or running out of food before they run out of month? Creating a preparedness mindset within the community also is the ability for people to connect and to be able to open and say, hey, we're struggling, right? Because if you look through history, the one social program that continues to work today is the food bank. Now, yes, we have a lot more demand on the food bank right now. I'm not questioning that whatsoever. But I'm saying is it's because food banks are generally run by the community and they're not run by the government. They're not part of an imposed program, but it's a community donating. My community here where I live in Ottawa just completed a massive food drive for those marginalized people in our society. Because I live in a community where there are some people who are having trouble getting enough to eat. And that's pretty sad. And we need to do something about that. We don't need the government involved. We don't need the government to cut checks to people, because for a government to cut check, they have to first take it away from somebody else. Look at the community. The community is made up of people who have the means to do that. So what did we do? What did the organization do? And I wasn't part of this. I just watched it happen. They put a big paper bag on everybody's doorstep a week ago, and it had stapled to the outside of it was a little flyer that said, we're doing this for the community members. This will remain in your community. This is what we're looking for. Please put it out on your doorstep by 10 a.m. on Saturday, and we will be by to pick it up. Dozens of volunteers and trucks, and they went around, and I took a wander around the neighborhood. Almost every single doorstep had a bag. Communities who have a sense of belonging, people are willing to help. People care, right? I don't need government to help the people who are marginalized in society. The community will, but you have to first build the sense of community. So yeah, absolutely. I have no problem providing money or food or whatever it might be to an organization that supports the community. That can be the catalyst to adopt a prepared mindset. And for most communities, most but not all, they have some type of existing community organization that can be leveraged. And a lot of time it's simply somebody volunteering to say, hey, listen, I'm willing to make a presentation to a local neighborhood group, right? I'm going to go on Facebook group for the neighborhood or Facebook marketplace for the area. And I'm going to announce that I think this is something that we need to consider in our neighborhood. I'm willing to take the lead in this. Who else is interested? DM me. Let's talk about setting up a meeting. We can talk about helping our community. A letter on doorknobs. An old friend of mine did this years ago, and I'm talking decade or two ago, when he moved into a new neighborhood. He didn't know anybody, right? So he hopped on his computer and he typed up 2 paragraphs about him, who he was, his family, where they came from, what they're about, what they believe in, blah, blah, blah. And he put it on a piece of paper and he printed out about, 60 copies. And he walked up the street and he put his phone number on it. And he put his email on it. Anybody interested in getting together and getting to know us, we'd be happy to meet you. And he literally put it in everybody's doorknob. Now, today you would think that individual was half not crazy, but this is not too far what humanity is about. Now, he said he got a number of calls. He got a number of people says, great, glad you're in the neighborhood, happy to meet you. Why don't you drop over for a burger on Sunday? We'd love to meet you. And he just built relationships from there because he, instead of just sitting in the house in the neighborhood, he went out to meet the people around him. And it was something that shocked me a couple of years ago when a new family moved in to our townhouse development. I was working in the garage one day and I heard a knock on the door and I turned around and there they were. Hi, we're so-and-so. We're here to introduce ourselves. We just moved in a couple of doors down. Wow. I mean, how long it's been since I've done that? I didn't do it when I moved here. And so in most communities, you have an intrinsic desire to be belonging. You have an intrinsic need to be prepared because we know that the 2020s are a chaotic decade. They're only going to get worse for some very good reasons and very well understood reasons. And as shocks get greater and greater and have larger impact, it takes a community to respond to them. So we know the need is there to build it. We know the desire for people to have a sense of belonging exists. So the key is to put those two together at the community level, right? It's called with and within. So with the community and within the community, creating that sense of relationship. And it starts with someone. Maybe it's you listening to this who decides to take action, who decides to put something on Facebook to start a group, who decides to just print off 100 pieces of paper and walk around your street and roll it up and stick in everybody's doorknob saying, hey, Saturday at 2 o'clock, drop down to my garage. The door will be open. We're going to sit there. We're going to have pop and chips and we're going to talk about preparedness. See if anybody shows up. Somebody will. And then that's one more person to talk to, 2 more people to talk to, 3 more people to talk to. And before you know it, you're going to have a meeting of a community preparedness group. And they're going to start putting flyers out about they've arranged free first aid training for anybody who's interested. Oh, you'll start to get volunteers coming out. And before you know it, over time, these things, you need to have a bit of patience. They take a bit of time to come to fruition. But eventually, a year, 2 years down the line, you've got a robust sense of community. And in case you haven't figured out, that also helps with security too. Because when everybody knows everybody, everybody looks out from everybody. Hey, didn't the Jones away? Or, yeah, I thought Mohammed was gone for a week. Why is the lights on in his house? I'm going to go over and knock on the door and make sure everything's okay. You know what I mean? That type of sense of belonging that exists. So hopefully you find that in your community. If you don't, hopefully something on this podcast episode today gave you some ideas about how that may be possible, helpful for you and your family to create that within your community and a greater sense of belonging. Again, keep the feedback coming at insidemycanoehead.ca. There's a link there to send me an email at jeff@preparednesslabs.ca. There's also a link there to buy me a coffee. If you like what you hear and you want to just reach out and buy us a coffee, there's a link on the website as well. If not, one thing I ask you to do, and one thing only, is to share this podcast with somebody else so that somebody else gets the opportunity to get this free information that we offer. It will always be free and available. It's our community service. Take care and stay safe.